The road to Blackwell Hill was long and empty. No cars passed by, no birds flew above. Even the wind felt tired. The taxi stopped near an old iron gate. The driver did not turn around. "This is as far as I go," he said quietly. The man in the back seat nodded. His name was Elias Blackwell. He stepped out of the car and looked at the gate. It was broken. Rust covered it like dried blood. Beyond the gate stood the Blackwell house. It was bigger than he expected. Tall, silent, dark. Its windows looked like empty eyes. The taxi left without saying goodbye. Elias stood alone. He had never been here before. But something inside him whispered, "You have returned." Elias Blackwell was the last of his family. At least, that is what he believed. He grew up far away, in another country. His mother never spoke about their past. When he asked about Blackwell Hill, she always said the same words. Some doors should stay closed. Now she was dead. And this house was all he had left. As Elias walked toward the house, the air felt heavy. Each step became slower. The ground was soft, like it remembered many footsteps. The front door was already open. That was strange. No one had lived here for years. Elias paused. He listened. Nothing. No sound. No movement. Still, he felt watched. Inside, the house smelled old dust. Wood. Something bitter. The floor creaked under his feet. Every sound echoed as if the house repeated it. The walls were covered with dark paintings. Faces without eyes, bodies without names. Elias looked away. "This place is wrong," he whispered. His voice sounded in the air. He moved deeper inside the house. The hallway felt endless. Doors stood on both sides. Most were locked. One door at the end was different. It was open. A cold wind came from inside. Elias felt a chill run through his body. Still, he walked forward. The room was empty. No furniture, no light. Only a single candle burned in the center. Elias froze. He was sure he had not lit it. The flame did not move. It did not shake. It waited. Suddenly Elias heard a sound. Footsteps, not his own. Slow, careful, behind him. The hallway was empty. Psst, the hallway was empty. But the footsteps continued. Closer, closer. Then silence. Elias felt his heart race. He wanted to leave, to run. But another feeling stopped him. Curiosity. Fear and curiosity are close friends. He picked up the candle. The flame felt cold. As he turned, he saw something on the wall. Words scratched deep into the wood. "We arrived. We never left." Elias stepped back. His hand shook. "Who wrote this?" he asked. The house did not answer. Night fell quickly, too quickly. Elias did not remember the sun setting. Darkness swallowed the house. The candle was his only light. He found the living room. Old chairs, a broken table, and a large family portrait. The Blackwells, men, women, children, all staring forward. All serious, all familiar. Elias stepped closer. His breath stopped. One face looked exactly like him. Same eyes, same jaw, same fear. Below the portrait, words were written in faded ink. "The Blackwell blood returns to the house." Elias felt dizzy. "This can't be real," he said. But deep down he knew. The house remembered him. That night Elias slept on the floor. He locked the door. Still he dreamed. In his dream, the house was alive. Walls breathed. Doors whispered names. He saw people walking through the halls. Their faces were burned. Their mouths moved, but no sound came out. Then a voice spoke. Not loud, not soft. Clear. "You arrived, Elias, just like the others." He woke up screaming. The candle was still burning. And the door was open. Elias sat up slowly. His hands were cold. On the floor, something new lay before him. A book, old, heavy, bound in black leather. He had not seen it before. On the cover, one word was written. Blackwell. As he touched the book, the house creaked loudly, almost like laughter. Outside, thunder rolled across the hill. Elias opened the book. The first page read, "This is the history of a family that should never have arrived. Elias swallowed hard. He did not know it yet, but by opening that book, had awakened something that had been waiting for generations. Waiting for him. Elias sat on the cold floor with the black book resting in his hands, the candle beside him burning without smoke, and the house around him breathing slowly like a sleeping animal. And as he opened the book further, he saw that the pages were not clean or empty, but filled with names written in dark ink. Some neat, some shaking, some pressed so hard that the paper beneath was torn, and every name carried the same last word. Blackwell, and as Elias read them, his chest tightened, because the dates beside each name ended the same way. With no place, no reason, only silence. And as he turned page after page, he noticed something worse. The names were not only from the past, they continued forward in time, closer and closer to the present, until his fingers stopped because the next page was almost blank, holding only 3 names. 2 crossed out and 1 left unfinished, and that name was Elias, his own name written in the same dark ink, waiting, and the candle flickered for the first time, casting long shadows that twisted across the walls. And Elias closed the book quickly as if it could see him back. And in that moment, the house groaned deeply, not like old wood, but like something waking up. And a soft knocking sound echoed through the halls, slow and steady, not from the door, but from inside the walls. And Elias stood up, his legs weak, his breath shallow, and he told himself it was only an old house. Only his fear, but the knocking continued, moving, traveling through the walls like footsteps trapped inside stone. And then a voice followed, not loud, not clear, but close enough to feel, whispering his name once. Then again, and Elias backed away until his shoulders hit the wall, his eyes scanning the darkness. And suddenly the candle went out, leaving him alone in complete blackness, and in that dark, he felt something brush past him, cold like dead skin, and when the candle lit itself again, Elias was no longer alone in the room, because the walls were different now. Covered in marks and scratches, lines carved deep by desperate hands, symbols he did not understand, prayers mixed with warnings, and one sentence repeated again and again, written by different hands in different sizes, "Do not read the names aloud," and Elias felt a sharp fear cut through him, because he had already whispered some of them without knowing why, and the knocking stopped, replaced by silence so heavy it hurt his ears. And from the far end of the hallway he saw a door slowly opening, one that had been locked before, revealing a staircase leading down. And cold air rushed up from below, carrying the smell of earth and rot. And Elias knew without being told that the answers he wanted were waiting down there, and that the house would not let him leave until he faced them. And as he stepped toward the stairs, the book in his hands began to feel warm, almost alive, and the pages turned on their own, stopping at a page filled with tight writing, describing a night long ago, when the first Blackwell arrived at this hill, carrying faith in his mouth and sin in his heart, building the house not on stone, but on a promise broken in blood. And Elias felt a sharp pain behind his eyes, as images filled his mind that were not his own, men praying with shaking hands, children crying behind locked doors, candles burning beside bodies that were never buried, and through it all, the house standing, watching, remembering, feeding. And when the vision stopped, Elias was on his knees at the top of the stairs, gasping, the candle trembling in his grip. And the whisper returned, closer now, no longer calling his name but asking a question. The same question every Blackwell before him had been asked, "Will you finish the story?" And Elias looked down into the dark below, knowing that every step he took would pull him deeper into the family he tried to escape, deeper into a history that did not want peace, only continuation. And behind him, the front door of the house slowly closed on its own, locking with a sound that echoed like a final prayer, sealing his arrival not just in the house, but in the bloodline itself. Elias took his first step down the staircase slowly, the candle shaking in his hand as the darkness below seemed thicker than the dark above. And with every step the air grew colder and heavier, pressing against his chest until breathing felt like work. And the wooden stairs groaned as if they had not been touched in years, yet somehow they felt warm under his feet, like they remembered the weight of others before him. And as he descended, the whispering returned, not as words but as low sounds, like prayers spoken backward, wrapping around his ears and sinking into his thoughts. And when he reached the bottom, he found himself in a long underground corridor carved directly into stone. The walls wet and cracked, marked with old symbols and faded religious signs that had been scratched over again and again, as if someone kept trying to erase them but failed. And the candlelight revealed dark stains on the floor that did not look like dirt, stains that followed a path forward, leading him deeper. And though fear pulled at him, Elias followed, because something inside him felt pulled forward, like a rope tied around his soul, and soon the corridor opened into a wide chamber where the ceiling disappeared into shadow, and in the center stood a large stone table surrounded by broken chairs, chains hanging from the walls, and candles melted into the floor. Frozen in time, and Elias realized this was not a cellar or a basement, but a place of gathering, a place where people once stood together, not in hope but in desperation, and as he moved closer he noticed names carved into the stone table. Hundreds of them, overlapping, crossing, cutting into each other, and every name was Blackwell, and his stomach twisted as he traced the letters with his fingers, feeling the deep grooves left by hands that pressed hard, hands that did not want to be forgotten. And suddenly the candle dimmed again, and from the far side of the chamber a shape began to form, not a solid body, but a shadow darker than the rest, stretching upward like smoke that refused to rise, and Elias froze as the shadow slowly turned toward him. And though it had no face, he felt its attention like a weight pressing down on his mind, and the whisper became clear at last, speaking not from the air but from inside his head, telling him that this place was built to remember, that every prayer spoken here was fed to the house, every confession carved into its bones. And Elias felt memories flood into him that were not his own, images of Blackwells kneeling in circles, cutting their palms, letting blood drip onto the stone, asking for forgiveness they never believed they deserved, promising devotion, silence, obedience. And when they failed, the house listened, and when the house listened, it answered not with mercy, but with hunger. And Elias fell to his knees as the truth pressed down on him, that the family curse was not a curse at all, but a bargain renewed again and again by fear. And the shadow moved closer, spreading across the floor, crawling up the walls until Elias could feel its cold touch against his skin. And he heard another voice then, different from the whisper, softer, broken, the voice of a woman crying his name, his mother's voice, telling him to leave, telling him she tried to run, telling him the house followed her in dreams, in sickness, in silence. And Elias clenched his teeth as tears filled his eyes, because he understood now why she never spoke of this place, why she never let him return. And the shadow paused as if listening, then slowly pulled back, retreating toward the far wall where a narrow doorway appeared, one that had not been there before. And Elias knew this was not an escape, but an invitation, a deeper truth waiting beyond. And as he stood and wiped his face, the candle suddenly flared bright, revealing something carved above the doorway, words written carefully, not scratched in fear but etched with purpose. The house does not choose. The blood does. And Elias felt his heart sink, because he knew then that his arrival was never an accident, that every road he took, every loss he suffered, every step led him here. As he crossed the chamber toward the doorway, the chains on the walls rattled softly, not from movement but from memory, and behind him the stone table cracked slightly, as if reacting to his choice. And when he stepped through the doorway, the air changed again, warmer, closer, and the door closed silently behind him, sealing the chamber away. And Elias found himself standing in a small room with only one object inside, a mirror framed in black wood, old and cracked, and as he approached it, his reflection stared back, but it did not move when he did, its eyes darker, older, filled with something heavy and tired, and the reflection spoke without opening its mouth, telling him that every Blackwell saw this mirror, that it showed not what they were, but what they would become if they stayed. And Elias felt a deep fear settle in his bones as the candle went out once more, leaving only the mirror glowing faintly in the dark, waiting for him to look closer. Elias stood before the mirror as its faint light filled the small room. And the longer he looked, the less certain he became of which side was real. Because the reflection did not copy him, but studied him. Its eyes holding the weight of many years, and as Elias raised his hand, the reflection remained still. Its lips moving slowly, as if speaking words Elias could not hear, and the air grew tight around him, pressing against his chest until he felt the urge to look away, yet he could not, because the mirror began to change, showing not one face but many, layers of faces appearing and fading. Men and women of different ages, all with the same eyes, all carrying the same tired fear, and Elias realized these were the Blackwells. Not as they lived, but as they ended, their faces marked by regret, by silence, by prayers that went unanswered, and the reflection finally spoke, clearly telling Elias that this was the inheritance of his blood. Not money or land or name, but memory, that every Blackwell carried the weight of the ones before, whether they knew it or not. And Elias shook his head, whispering that he did not choose this, that he never wanted it. But the mirror replied without mercy that none of them did. That choice ended the moment the first Blackwell made his bargain beneath the house, and the room began to tremble lightly as if reacting to the truth, dust falling from the ceiling, the walls creaking with quiet strain. And Elias felt something stir inside him, not fear this time, but anger. A sharp heat rising in his chest, and he stepped closer to the mirror, demanding to know what the house wanted from him. Why it pulled him here, why it would not let him go. And the reflection answered slowly, telling him the house wanted continuation. Not worship, not blood, but presence. A Blackwell living within its walls to keep the memory alive. Because memory was its food, and Elias felt a sudden sickness twist his stomach, as he understood that every death, every madness, every disappearance was not punishment but refusal. Each Blackwell who tried to leave weakened the house, and each one who stayed made it stronger. And the mirror showed him images then, visions of relatives he'd never met. One who tried to burn the house and vanished before the flames took hold, one who fled across the sea only to die screaming in his sleep, one who prayed every night until his voice failed and his mind broke. And Elias saw his mother too, younger, standing at a train station, looking back once with tears in her eyes, and he felt her fear as if it were his own. Felt the house reaching for her even then. The vision faded as the mirror cracked down the center with a sharp sound, splitting the faces apart. And the room fell silent, and Elias staggered back, breathing hard, his hands shaking because he knew now that the house was not only around him, but inside him, carried in his blood, in his thoughts, in the way his heart beat faster the longer he stayed. And as he turned away from the broken mirror, the door behind him opened slowly, leading into a narrow hallway lit by candles that were already burning. And Elias walked forward without thinking, his steps steady, his fear changing shape, becoming something colder, more focused. And as he moved down the hallway, he heard voices again. Not whispers this time, but full conversations overlapping, arguing, praying, crying voices. From different times speaking all at once, and he realized these were not ghosts, but echoes, memories trapped in the walls, repeating forever. And the hallway led him into a large room that felt different from the others. Cleaner, quieter, almost calm, and at its center stood a long wooden table with a single chair. And on the table lay a folded letter sealed with black wax, his name written on the front in careful writing, and Elias approached slowly, knowing before he touched it that this letter was meant for him alone, written long before he was born. And when he opened it, the words inside were simple, written by a steady hand, telling him that if he was reading this, then the house had already accepted him. That resistance only caused suffering, that peace came from understanding the role he was meant to play, and the letter explained that one Blackwell must always remain, not as a prisoner, but as a keeper, someone to listen, to remember, to carry the weight so others could live free. And Elias felt his throat tighten as he read the final lines, which spoke not of duty, but of mercy, saying that by staying he could end the cycle of madness, that the house only grew violent when abandoned, and that acceptance would quiet it. And Elias lowered the letter slowly, his mind spinning, because the offer was cruel in its calmness, asking him to trade his future for silence, his freedom for control. As he stood there, the voices faded, the house growing still, as if waiting for his answer. And Elias realized with a sinking heart that the house was patient, that it could wait years, decades, generations, because it always won in the end. And as the candlelight flickered softly around him, Elias Blackwell understood that the true horror was not the house, not the whispers, not the darkness beneath the floor, but the choice being placed in his hands. A choice every Blackwell faced. A choice that never truly ended the story, only changed who carried it next. Elias remained standing by the table long after the letter slipped from his hands, candlelight trembling as if the house itself sensed the shift inside him, because something had changed. Not fear or anger, but resolve, a quiet refusal settling deep in his chest. And he knew then that he would not accept the role written for him, not because he believed he could win, but because surrender felt worse than death. And as he stepped away from the table, the room responded with a low groan, the sound rolling through the walls like distant thunder, and the candles dimmed, forcing Elias to move forward into the next hall, where the air felt tight and heavy again. And the whispers returned, sharper now, more urgent, warning him without words that resistance had consequences. But Elias pressed on, guided by instinct more than sight, until he reached a small chapel hidden within the house, its ceiling low, its walls cracked, forgotten place where broken benches lay scattered, and a single altar stood at the front, carved with symbols he recognized from the book, symbols of protection, of binding, of endings. Elias felt a cold certainty settle over him that this was where others had tried to end it before, where hope had come to die, and he approached the altar slowly, brushing dust aside to reveal dark stains soaked deep into the stone, stains left by hands that trembled like his now. And as he placed the candle down, the flame grew taller, brighter, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted across the chapel walls. And Elias remembered the warning carved into the house. It's not to speak the names aloud, yet he knew that silence had fed the house long enough. And with shaking breath, he opened the book once more, turning to the first page, the beginning of the list. And for the first time he spoke a name clearly, his voice echoing painfully through the chapel, and the house reacted instantly, the walls shaking, dust raining down, the whispers turning into screams, and Elias spoke another name, then another, each one heavier than the last, each one pulling something dark from the corners of the room, shapes forming briefly then tearing apart, and the air grew thick as if filled with smoke. And Elias felt pain surge through his head, memories crashing into him, deaths, regrets, promises broken in fear. Yet he continued, forcing the names out even as his knees buckled, because he understood now that the house did not fear prayers or rituals. It feared being remembered fully, without silence, without shame. And as he reached the final pages, his voice broke, his throat raw, but he refused to stop. And when he spoke his own name aloud, the chapel went completely still, the screams cutting off as if strangled, the house holding its breath, and for a brief moment Elias felt hope, real hope. As the shadows pulled back, and the candle burned steady, and the walls stopped shaking, and he thought he had done it, that the story had finally reached its end. But hope in the Blackwell house was always short-lived, because the silence that followed was not peace but judgment, and slowly, deliberately, the house responded, not with violence but with clarity, and Elias felt the truth settle over him like cold water. That the house had never needed silence to survive, only presence, and that by speaking the names he had not weakened it, but completed it, given it the one thing it lacked, recognition, and the altar cracked down the center with a loud snap, splitting open to reveal a hollow space beneath, and inside lay bones arranged carefully in a circle, small bones, children's bones. And Elias felt his breath leave him as understanding struck like a blade. That the first bargain had not been sealed by prayer alone, but by sacrifice, by innocence given willingly, and the house was not fed by memory, but by the lie that the past could be undone, and the whispers returned, calmer now, almost kind, telling him that every attempt to break the cycle only strengthened it. That resistance proved devotion deeper than obedience ever could. And Elias collapsed to the floor as the weight of generations pressed down on him, his strength draining, his resolve cracking, and the chapel doors closed slowly, sealing him inside as the candle went out at last, plunging the room into darkness, and in that darkness, Elias heard footsteps approaching. Not echoes, not memories, but something solid, something present, and a figure emerged from the shadows. A man who looked like him, but older, worn, hollow-eyed, wearing the same fear Elias felt now. And the man spoke in a tired voice, telling Elias that he too had tried to end it, that every Blackwell did, and that hope was the house's favorite weapon, because it brought them willingly to the altar. And Elias realized with horror that this was not a ghost, but a remnant. What remained of those who failed but never left, bound to the house not in death but in waiting. And the figure stepped back into the dark as the chapel walls began to close in slightly. Not crushing but containing, and Elias understood that the house was not punishing him, it was teaching him, showing him that the choice was never between freedom and captivity, but between suffering loudly or suffering quietly. And as the whispers faded into a low hum, and the chapel settled into stillness once more, Elias Blackwell lay on the cold stone floor, exhausted, broken, and finally aware that breaking the silence had not ended the story, only brought it closer to its final chapter. Elias lay on the stone floor for a long time after the chapel fell silent, his body heavy, his thoughts slow, as if the house had drained something from him and left only what it needed. And when he finally stood, the air felt calmer, not safer, but settled, like a storm that had decided to stay instead of pass, and the doors opened on their own, guiding him back through the halls that now felt familiar in a painful way, the walls no longer whispering but listening, and Elias walked without fear because fear had burned out, placed by a deep, tired knowing, and he returned to the heart of the house where the first candle still burned, waiting exactly where it had been left. And he understood then that the house was not rushing him, that it never rushed any Blackwell, because time meant nothing to something built on waiting. And as he sat in the chair before the table again, he felt memories settle into place inside him, like pieces of a broken mirror finally, aligning memories of lives he never lived, yet somehow remembered, long nights of prayer, quiet madness, moments of love ruined by silence. And he saw clearly now that every Blackwell before him had reached this same point, believing they were different, believing they would choose better. And in that understanding, Elias found a strange calm, because the truth no longer hid from him, and the truth was simple. The house did not trap them with chains or walls, trapped them with meaning, giving their suffering a purpose so it would be accepted. Elias looked around the room one last time, at the portraits, at the dark halls, at the door that led outside. And he knew he could still leave. His legs could carry him. The lock would open if he tried. But he also knew what waited beyond the hill. The same whispers and dreams, the same sickness, the same quiet pull. Back, and for the first time he felt compassion for the ones who stayed. Not weakness, but exhaustion guiding their choice. And Elias reached for the book again, opening it to the final page where his name waited unfinished. And with steady hands he took the pen resting beside it, the pen that had always been there. And he hesitated not from fear, but from grief, grieving the life he might have lived, the family he might have had, the peace. He would never know. And as he wrote the final line, the house sighed softly, not in victory but relief, as if something tight had finally loosened. And the candlelight grew warm, the walls settling, the weight easing just enough to breathe. And Elias felt the house accept him fully, not as a victim, but as a keeper. And in that moment the whispers stopped completely, leaving a silence deeper than any before, and days passed without him noticing, time blurring into routine, Elias learning the rhythms of the house, which rooms to avoid, which corners to respect, how to listen without answering, how to remember without drowning, and the house remained calm as long as he stayed present. As long as he did not pretend the past could be erased, and far away beyond the hill, the world continued without knowing what had been contained. Children born free of the weight lives untouched by the curse, because Elias carried it now alone, and sometimes at night he would stand by the window and watch the road, wondering who would come after him, knowing the answer even as he asked, because there was always another, Blackwell somewhere, blood spreading quietly. And one day someone would arrive again, believing they were the last. And Elias would be waiting, not to warn them away, but to tell them the truth gently, that the house does not end, it only changes hands. And years later, when Elias finally felt his body grow weak and his steps slow, the house remained, patient, guiding him back to the chair where it all began, and as he sat down one final time, he felt no fear, only the deep stillness of acceptance. And when his eyes closed, the candle went out on its own, leaving the house dark and quiet, holding his memory the way it held all the others. And somewhere far away a letter arrived, a notice of inheritance, a name written carefully on old paper, and on a lonely road a taxi stopped before a broken iron gate. And the driver said softly, "This is as far as I go," as the Blackwell house waited once more, watching, remembering, ready.